Hello, everyone. Just waiting for a couple of people who are in the waiting room to come in before I start. Okay, well, I guess I'll get started. So welcome to the info session for the Global English Camp. This is the last session that we will host before the deadlines for the early phase end. And I'll go into more detail about that as well. But let me just get my screen started. And if I can see the chat as well. So could someone just shoot me a message in the chat so that you can see the presentation that I have up for you? Great. Thank you. Good. So yes, hello. Hi, everyone. I'm Zain. I also need to add people into the waiting room, so I've got to multitask a bit today. Yes, so thank you all for coming to the info session today. Usually this would also have Matt Pawlik, the director of the program. Unfortunately, he's a bit busy today, but don't worry, you're in good hands. So I'm Zain. I have been on the English Camp program when I was in 2018 summer, and I returned again in 2019 as a leader. And since then, I've been working with Common Out on various other programs that we've been running and making. And today, I guess I'll be talking about the Global English Camp Summer Internship Program for the coming summer. So thank you for coming to this session. Usually we try and go out to different universities and talk with you in person, but of course, we can't do that. But thank you for coming to the Zoom session. It's slightly different, but hopefully it will give you just as much information as you would get otherwise. Just so you know, this session plans to be about an hour long or so. It might overrun once we've opened the floor to questions, because then people feel free to ask questions at the end as well. But we'll have some times throughout for questions throughout the presentation. I'm also just gonna send a ton of links in the chat. Here you go. So if you have any questions that you think about after the info session has ended, or you don't feel comfortable asking them in the middle of this info session, feel free to email either info@commonoutjapan.com, or you can email myself, Zain, at commonoutjapan.com. We also have the newsletter, which I'll talk a little bit about. And for more general information about the Global English Camp, there's the website, commonoutjapan.com/Global English Camp. And if you want to see a recording of this video, which we'll upload onto YouTube, the link for that will be at commonoutjapan.com/webinars. So quite a few different links there, but now we'll get to the main part of the info session. So the newsletter is the best way to keep up to date with all of the information that we have. We don't spam you, I promise. We only send emails out twice a month, and we won't share your email out with any other corporations or organizations as well. So that's safe with us. And this is the best way to know about other seminars that we run. If you want to see blog posts from previous interns, if you want to see offers on TEFL certificates, and updates on COVID in particular as well. And again, everything will be uploaded online. So let's begin. Regarding COVID, so of course, COVID is the big question nowadays, especially with regards to this program. And this is kind of our general way of doing things, is that we are regularly checking for updates on the situation, seeing how Japan is coping with the coronavirus, whether they'll accept people coming into the country, and so on. And we will generally be following the Tokyo Olympics protocols. So if the Olympics are running in the summer coming, then probably we will also be running. If the Olympics are not running this coming summer, then probably we will also not be running. So we will roughly be following the protocols. In the summer that had just gone, the Olympics did not run, and we also did not run the program as well. If the program is not held this coming summer, there will not be a remote version. The infrastructure is not set up for that. So it will not be held this summer remotely. And if we accept your application, you may defer your internship anytime before you buy plane tickets. And I'll talk a bit more about that process a bit later. but that's part of the advantage of this program is flexibility in terms of applying and accepting. So, and this doesn't have to be related to COVID. If you get some other internship offer or another job offer or something else happens and for whatever reason you can't join this program, as long as you haven't paid for your tickets yet, then you may defer or cancel the application. And again, just sign up for the newsletter. It's a great way to get all of the information coming as it comes out. So this is the plan for the info session. I'll give you a quick introduction and overview of the English camp, a little bit about who we are and the partnerships involved with the program. I'll talk a bit about the application process, interviews, and onboarding. And then I'll talk about orientation and training, so the first week that you come into Japan. After that, I'll pause there for a Q&A. So if you have any questions based off of what I've said up to that point, that's a perfect time to ask. We'll also have opportunities later to talk about things like the camp itself, so what you're actually doing, logistics and subsidies. So if you have any questions regarding money or travel, that's where you'll probably get your answers. So if you have questions now already, hold off until I get to that section, because I'll probably answer your question through the slides. If not, we'll have another Q&A session immediately after that. And then I'll talk a bit more about what goes on outside of the classroom and then a final Q&A. So hopefully all of that was clear. We usually have this lovely English camp promo video that we like to show, but for time, I won't show this now. It is available on the website. So if you just go to commonapjapan.com/global English camp, it will be there in the information section. So feel free to look at that in your own time. And now a bit of an overview of the camp. All of this information is available on the website as well. So what is the Global English Camp? It's a 5-week unpaid internship in Japan, slightly longer if you're a returning intern, but most of you will not be. It's aimed at university students, recent graduates, and PhD students. So even if you've already graduated from university, or if you're only just started university and you're a freshman, this program is available for you, and we don't have any preference of ages as well. So we want a wide variety of ages and experience for the program. And the program is aimed to provide an opportunity for Japanese students to practice their English speaking skills, to grow their confidence, and to discover their life mission. Those are 3 of the main things involved with this program, helping the students to speak English, become more confident, and to think about their future. Each week, excluding the training week, interns facilitate themed discussion sessions in a classroom setting with 2 to 6 primarily high school students in a classroom of about 15 to 100 people. So lots of different bits in that sentence. So every week you'll get a new batch of students, usually about 2 to 6, and you might be teaching with someone else or you might be teaching on your own. This will depend partly on which week you're in and also which venue you're at. And you'll be in a classroom with other interns and other students, as well as some Japanese staff as well. And each week you'll get a new group of students. The program also offers optional activities throughout the 5 weeks that you're there, both after class and on the weekends. And although the internship as a whole is unpaid, the sponsor does provide certain expenses for each intern who participates. So there are some optional activities that you can get involved with. None of them are required, and you are free to do basically whatever you want outside of the classrooms, provided that you arrive on time and get to the locations that we asked you to do, and that you're committed fully during the actual teaching itself. You're basically free to do whatever you like. The exact dates for the 2021 program are to be decided, and you'll see that a lot throughout this info session. Unfortunately, there is just a lot of uncertainty with regards to the coronavirus. So a lot of the information I'll give you today will be based off of previous years. And based off of previous year, we actually had 2 groups of interns. So Group A started on the 10th of July, or would start around the 10th of July to the 20th of August, and Group B would start and end a week later, 17th July to 27th August. And this was so that any interns who had to leave a week early, maybe their university started sooner than others, or maybe they had to come into Japan a bit later, maybe their job finished a little bit later on the 15th of July, say, then we had different options. And this was based off of the fact that our cohort of interns was also quite large in 2019. This is still to be decided. we depends on how many interns we choose to accept. We might have one cohort. We might even have 3, potentially. These things are still to be decided. A few numbers. So in 2019, we accepted 178 interns. We also had 27 returning interns. So interns from previous years, 2018 and before, who wanted to come back and be on the program again. We had the 200 or so interns split into about 15 different teams, so these are the main other interns that you'll be working alongside throughout the different weeks. We also work with 25 different universities across the US, UK, Canada, and a few other places in Europe. And we also worked in 57 different venues in Japan. And this went from big venues like Tokyo and Osaka, so some of our main big venues, to really small venues out in Okinawa or Kyushu or up north in Hokkaido. So here's a little bit about us, who is involved with the program. Common Out Japan, the program administrator. This is the company that I work for. So we organize the applications. So we look at your applications first. We organize the first interviews that you go through. We also help you with the onboarding process, the program retreat. We organize the activities, and we're your ground support. So in that group of about 10 or 15 or so, there will always be a leader or a returning intern who kind of works very closely with Common Out Japan, who will be there with you to help and support you whenever you need help and support. One of the big sponsors of the program is Nagase Brothers, or Toshin, and they have, as it says, over 40 years of educational background in Japan. They run what are called cram schools in Japan, which is for high school students to get some extra tuition or tutoring after school. And Toshin provides the second interview that you would go through. They also oversee daily classes, curriculum organization, and they recruit the Japanese high school students. And the third program sponsor is Common Up, and they organize the housing, the transportation, the language classes. They organize some activities. They're another source of ground support. They're emergency contact and reimbursement. So a lot of the pastoral sides of things. So those are the 3 big companies that work with this program and help to organize and help to run things. So now I'll talk a little bit about the application phase. So currently we're in the early phase, and that will end at the end of the 30th of November, midnight at PST, because Matt, our program director, is based in Los Angeles. And this is the early phase. Once the early phase ends, we take that big old stack of applications and we run through them. Everything after that is accepted on a rolling basis. So it might possibly be that we look at this early phase and we say, yep, we've got our 200 interns, we're happy, and everyone else who applies after that, sorry, you're either on the waiting list or you're not accepted. So it's really important that you get your application in that early phase. I think around 3/4 of our interns from previous years were accepted in that early phase. After that is the regular phase, so up until the end of the year. And again, these are accepted on a rolling basis. So it might be that if you get yours in, say, December 15th, 150 people have already been accepted, and we're waiting to get to you for interviews and so on. So it's really important that you get into your early phase. If you're not accepted immediately, you might still be put onto the wait list. So as I've explained previously, we're quite flexible in terms of letting interns accept the position or choosing to defer it or decline it, which means that we do have a pretty lengthy wait list, and occasionally you can go up into the main acceptance as well. We've had a few common questions recently based off of the applications, so I'll go through some of the common questions here. So you do not need to be a native English speaker, but as long as you're native level. And so usually you'd kind of show that you are native level if you're going to a university in a native speaking country, so in the US or the UK or Canada, for example, or we'd see that through your application written up, if your grammar and vocabulary is fine, and we'd also see that through your interviews. So potentially if you wanted to show, say, a qualification for an English level speaking ability, then that would also be fine. So you do not need to be an native English speaker as long as you're native level. You also do not need any formal teaching experience, and you do not need a TOEFL certificate. Of course, this will make your application stronger if you do have it, but we do not require this at all. We're looking for interns from a wide variety of majors and backgrounds. You also do not need to have visited Japan or speak any Japanese. The program is entirely in English. All of the daily classes are in English. And in the training week, we also help you to kind of get through Japan, kind of the standard typical things you might want to know to be able to make your way through, say, going to a restaurant and buying some lunch. So we do help you a little bit with that as well. You also, more specifically, you do not need to be a Japanese or education major. So for example, I studied maths at university. Our program director, Matt, studied film. I've met lots of people who have studied all sorts of things from geography, history, media, English, East Asian studies, if they wanted to, other STEM subjects, so physics, chemistry, engineering, and so on. We want a wide variety of people from a wide variety of backgrounds. So if these things are not required, you don't need to have formal teaching experience, you don't need to be TEFL certified, you don't need to have visited Japan, you don't need to speak Japanese, you don't need to be a Japanese or education major. What is required? Well, we're looking for interns who are patient. We're looking for interns with flexibility. We're looking for interns with maturity. And we're looking for interns with a lot of passion. So this is a difficult camp, straight up, right? You're in a different country. You probably don't speak the language. Or if you do, it's probably, you won't be able to read the language, or you don't have quite the fluency of Japanese. Every week, you're working with a different group of students. And, high school students, they can be a bit rough, a bit moody sometimes. You might have to travel each week. You might have to be on the Tokyo train at rush hour in the morning and in the night. It's a very intense program. It's an incredibly rewarding program, and it's an amazing experience that I've had and other people have had as well. But it is tough. So we're looking for people with some patience, flexibility, and maturity. It might be that one week, one of your students just isn't responding to you very well, just looking like they're not very interested and not looking like they want to be there. You need to have the maturity to be able to sit there patiently and to try and work with them throughout the whole week to get them to warm up to you. It might be that you had some miscommunication with another intern. In personalities clash. We have a lot of interns on the program. You need to have the patience to be able to put that to one side and say, okay, I'm going into my classroom now. This is for my students. I need to put whatever I have aside and work with my students now. And we also need to have passion. So the program is mainly to impart on the students. If your main purpose of coming to this program is to try and get 5 weeks in Japan, unfortunately, this is not the program for you. Our focus really is on the students. Yes, there are opportunities to speak the language, visit around places, eat the food, and so on, but that's not the priority of this program. The students are the priority of this program. So these are the kind of interns that we're looking for. A few more questions. So do applications from previous years affect your odds? Because the 2020 summer program, so the summer that just happened, did not run, some applications from there have moved on to this coming summer. So that does affect your odds slightly. Does your GPA matter a lot? This is part of the application, and we've had some questions. It does not matter very much. It's mostly just a case of making sure that you're at a good standing with your university. If you're struggling quite a lot with your university, then perhaps going on to this internship should not be your focus. But most people shouldn't really worry about this too much. What about visas? So people from the US, the UK, and Canada have typically received a 90-day visa upon entry. And our program, being only about 5 weeks, gives you a few weeks before and a few weeks after, so there'll typically be no problems there, especially because this is an unpaid internship. This way, you're allowed to come in on a tourist visa, which most people get on arrival, stay there for less than 90 days, and then return back home with no problems. Of course, if things change with the coronavirus, then this is something that we will keep you updated with in the newsletter. If you do not have the passport from UK, US, Canada, then that's something that we can work closely with you. We do this on a case-to-case basis. So if this is something you're worried about, don't be. Just keep us in communications. We'll let you know how things go on. Here are some things to worry about later. So this is things to be aware of that this will come up later in the onboarding process. So maybe you have a medical condition. This is something you can let us know in the application process now, or there's an opportunity to let us know in the onboarding process later. we do have medical insurance and health insurance for your trip to Japan. But of course, it needs to be a communication. You need to make us aware of these things first so that we can be properly prepared. If you have dietary requirements, if you're vegan, vegetarian, you have allergies, you eat halal, you eat kosher, there's nothing to worry about. I myself, I'm Muslim, I eat halal, and I had no problems at all in Japan. We have a big cohort of interns and past interns who worked really hard to work with each other to let people know, hey, if you're looking for vegetarian food, this is a great place to check out. Hey, if you're looking for halal food, this is a great app to use. If you're worried about allergies, hey, this is how you ask, does this have sesame oil in Japanese? And so, these are things that you might be concerned about, and you should be, but this is things that we take care of for you as well. So as long as you work with us to let us know about these things, we'll make sure that you are safe and happy. Location preferences. You don't have to worry about this right now, but in the future, we do ask you if you would prefer to stay in Kanto, which is where Tokyo is, stay in Kansai, so a bit more to the west, where Osaka and Kyoto are, if you're interested in traveling all over the country and you want to see everything, or if you're okay with being flexible and you don't really mind where we put you as long as you're somewhere. Just a note, if you're interested in doing homestays, your best bet is to be traveling. It is very difficult to find homestays in the big cities like Tokyo and Osaka. So if you really want a homestay, putting traveling as your option means that you get to go to some smaller venues and you get to stay with a Japanese family. And I can talk about homestays a bit more later on as well. Can you request to be on the same team or live with another intern? Unfortunately, the logistics of this are very difficult, especially if different interns have different preferences on where they want to stay and where they want to travel and so on. So you can always request it and we'll definitely look at it. And depending on the logistics, we might be able to allow this or it might be too difficult. So there's always something that you can ask and we can always try. What about character references? So later on in the onboarding process, we do ask for references. This is nothing to worry about. If you have a personal tutor at university or a supervisor for a project that you've done at university, maybe you've worked a part-time, maybe you've worked a part-time job and you can ask your manager for that. It's generally pretty easy to get a character reference, just someone who's had a bit more of a leadership or a managerial role above you in the past. So I wouldn't worry about that for now. So just before we go into our questions, I'll talk a bit about the orientation and training that we've had in previous years. So of course, things are subject to change, especially with the coronavirus and the pandemic, but this is what we've done previously. So you come in on your very first weekend, slightly earlier for group A, slightly later for group B, if that happens this year as well. You get to check in and we have a nice welcome party. You get to relax a bit, try and sleep off the jet lag if you can. And then that very first week is spent in training. And so training is based off of previous interns and leaders coming back and sharing their experiences with you and sharing their methods and ways to deal with different situations and also exploring through our textbook. So the curriculum has already been decided for you, mostly by Toshin, which was the Japanese company that organizes what they want the Japanese students to cover. So this was the topic from the previous year, and I'll go through this in more detail later on in this info session, but basically everything has more or less been organized for you, but there is also lots of room for flexibility. So there are lots of different options if a particular activity isn't working very well with your team or with your students, or you're just not particularly interested in it, there is still some options and flexibility. So you get to learn, you get to sift through the book, understand what to expect in the coming week, understand some tips and tricks from previous mentors and interns. And it's a great experience. And it's also the first time, and perhaps one of the only times, where you'll get to be with the majority of the rest of your cohort. Because soon after this, people will start to be moving to different venues across Japan. So this is the orientation and training week. And typically as well, after the training week, we usually go on a retreat, so an excursion to Hakone, which is a little bit closer to Mount Fuji. But of course, this might not happen this year due to the coronavirus. So we'll keep you up to date with all these things as we get to know them, particularly from the newsletter, and particularly when you arrive in Japan. So that was the first section of this info session. Thank you for sitting there very patiently while I kind of talked. If you have any questions about what I've said, please feel free to put them in the chat if you want, or if you want, you can turn off your mic and you can ask questions. If you want to turn off your cam as well, feel free to do that. If you have any questions about these things, so the camp itself, what you do during the actual weeks, any questions about logistics or subsidies, any questions about things that happen outside the classroom, just hold off for a second because we'll be coming to that a bit later. So I have a question in the chat. If your passport expires in the middle of 2021, but you're renewing it now, then it should be fine, because if you're renewing it now, then you should have a valid passport until the end of 2021. So I would say on the application that you will have a valid passport for the end of 2021. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you. I'm just going to take a quick water break because I'm doing this on my own for the first time. Yep, so we have another question about the GPA. So just to repeat what I said previously, the GPA is not something to worry about. For the most part, it's just us making sure that you have a good standing with your university and that there's nothing to be worried about in terms of you and your studies. For the most part, don't worry about that. I mean, if you can't tell, I'm a Brit. So I'm in London currently. I don't actually know what a GPA is, to be honest, and I was fine. Thank you. Yes, so another question from the chat. A language qualification is not required for English, that is. As long as you can sufficiently prove that your English is at native level, and that would usually happen via the application. So the statements that you write on your application and through the interviews primarily, as long as we feel comfortable that you're at a native level speaking, then you should be fine. If you have a language qualification, feel free to put that in. And then, then there's no issues. Thank you. Okay, so that looks like all the questions for now. So I'll continue with the info session. And as you have more questions coming up, feel free to ask them again in the chat. So the camp itself. This is, so I've talked about the very first week, which is the training week. Sorry, just a quick question from the chat. If you have a senior student returning to do a master's, that's perfectly fine. There's no real age limit. So if you're an undergraduate, if you're a master's, if you're a PhD, if you've graduated already, there's no problem. We want a wide variety of age ranges. Sure, why not? Yeah, I'm sure you'd have a lot of great experiences to impart onto the students. So there's no problem there. So the camp. The very first week, we had the training week, and then after that would be about 4 weeks of actual teaching. And each week will be basically the same, but with a different group of students. So here's how the week looks. It's a lot of writing. We'll go through it slowly, I promise. So each day of teaching is roughly 9:30 to about 5:30 or so. So standard kind of working hours, just shifted a little bit later. On day one, it's all about getting to know each other. So we have a nice opening ceremony where you introduce yourselves to the whole class, and we do lots of speaking exercises. And that's a big part of this program, is that it's not vocabulary 101. It's not grammar 101. You're not standing in front of a whiteboard or a chalkboard while the students do tests and quizzes all day long. That is not what this camp is about. It's all about speaking. It's all about energy. It's all about getting out of your seat, moving around, talking, and using your words. So we have exercises between the students and with the interns, and we also have a university fair as well. So this is when you get to talk to the students about your university and what it's like to study at your university, what the local area is like, and just to let the students see what university life is like outside of Japan, because most of them probably wouldn't have even thought of applying outside of Japan. And towards the end of the day, we start our discussions. So in previous years, the main theme has been the Tokyo Olympics and Paralympic Games. Of course, that probably won't be the case, considering it should hopefully be running while we're doing this program. But there are lots of other options as well. And I'll talk about some of the options that we've done in the past later on in this presentation. On the second day, we start off another major part of the program, which is the major or field of study or life mission presentations. So again, you, the interns, will be presenting to lots of different students throughout the week about what you study, why you study, and what you want to do in the future. And this is just a great way to talk to lots of different students and let the students see lots of different types of degrees. So they're probably roughly second year of high school, the majority of the students are. So they're about 16 to 17 years old. And they're starting to think about university, they're starting to think what they want to do in the future. And seeing all of these different people with all of their different experiences and what they've done with their life really lets them have the opportunity to think about what they want to do themselves. And then at the end of Tuesday, we start working on the presentations. So I'll show you a bit about the presentations later on, but this is an opportunity for the students as a group to make a nice big poster, talk through some of their ideas in front of the whole class. And you're up there as well, supporting them, holding up a big old poster that they've made. The third day is very similar. You do the majors, field of study, life mission presentations to the students, hopefully this time to a different group of students, so that all the students get to see lots of different presentations over the week. And they start discussing a big part of our program, which is the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. If you're not familiar with them yet, trust me, you will be by the time you get to the program. Again, this is just letting the students think about the wider world around them as a whole and what they can do to in the bigger picture for the world around them. On the fourth day, again, very similar, presentations in the morning before lunch. And they do presentations again in the afternoon. And very similar to what they've done on Tuesday, working together, make a poster, present to the class. This time will be on a goal of their topic, where they then talk about a particular topic or two and some solutions that they've thought up themselves. And it's a really great way to see the students come up with some really amazing ideas and think about how they want to help the world around them. And then fifth day is something completely different, the life mission presentations. So the whole week, the students have been thinking about their life mission, what they want to do in the future. Some of that is about what they want to study at university. Some of that is a career or a job that they want to do. Some of that is just, in life, I want to be rich and retire at the age of 30, or I just want to be happy, or I want to have a big family and a happy home. There's lots of different life missions that we see with the students. And this is a really great opportunity to see how much of an impact you've made on the students. On Tuesday, when they give their very first presentation as a group to the whole class, they're nervous as anything. And they're really stumbling through their English, but they're working hard. By day 5, by Friday, they're standing on their own, talking for a few minutes purely in English to the whole class. And it's amazing seeing the growth that they've made. Day 5, it really tells you how much of a change you've helped these students go through. And what's lovely about the life mission presentations is that every student really does their own thing. So when I was in my first year in 2018, I remember being in my third week, and one of my students was really interested in becoming a doctor. She really wanted to become a doctor and be involved in medicine. She also loved music, and she was part of her school band. So for her presentation, she spent half the time talking about wanting to become a doctor, and the other half the time, she played a song for us on her acoustic guitar. She brought it into the class, she pulled it out, and she just played a song for everyone. And it was lovely. It was a wonderful experience, and I still have that video on my phone for whenever I want to have a look at it. So it's a really wonderful experience. And what's great is that you get to do it 4 times, because after the training week, each week basically looks the same thing in a different venue with a different set of kids. Outside of this, you can basically do whatever you want. So once that last review has finished, you're free to do whatever you want. Go have your own dinner, go out with your friends to a museum if they're still open at that time, or go out for some drinks, or anything, as long as you're back bright, wide-eyed, and ready for the next morning, for the next day. I should also mention that Sunday is our big travel day. So if you're changing from venue to venue, Sunday is the day where you get onto your Shinkansen, your bullet train, to the other side of the country, or you take a flight out to Hokkaido, or you take a train over to the other states. So that is a week as a whole. And I'll show you through some pictures to see how that looks. So speaking exercise, as I said, it's all full energy. It was all about getting out of your seat, playing some games, having some fun, using your words, just trying to get them excited about English. the 2020 Olympics discussions. So working together, making a nice poster, and then getting up on stage and everyone having a bit to say about the Olympics and some of the ideas about the Olympics. One of the alternatives we have is the entrepreneurship discussions. So this gives students the opportunity to really get their creative juices thinking. So one example that we've had in previous years is a microwave bento box named Mike. So they've thought about what kind of things they really want, and they think, well, if I could have a bento box that keeps my food warm, that'd be great. It'd be even better if his name was Mike. And they thought about some different prices, so 3,000 yen for the small size, 4,000 yen for the medium, and 5,000 yen for the large. Another group had another idea of the domination switch, which turns off your annoying siblings. So again, they had this idea, they thought about some different choices and options, and they wanted to come together and present to the whole class their idea. So there's lots of options and there's lots of freedom with the textbook. Again, another big part is world issues, so the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and you really get to see all the different students talk about some really amazing topics. So on this slide, you see people talking about gender, energy consumption, education and poverty, and lots of different topics. So it's really amazing seeing these kids, these students, really thinking big. And the final day speech is their life mission, getting up in front of everyone, big energy, maybe a microphone, maybe not. Maybe they have their speech with them, hopefully they memorized it, but really just going all out and being with the whole class. And then at the end of the last day is the closing ceremony. And this is when you get to talk to the whole class again and just give them, a brief few words about your experiences with that group of students that week. And they also, it can get quite emotional sometimes. You really do grow a strong bond with these students over the span of 5 days, which sounds a bit cheesy, I know, but it is cheesy. It's real, the kind of connections that you make with these students. So this is the most important slide, arguably, about money and travel and all of these sorts of things. So I'm sure most of you have questions regarding this, so pay attention. This is the big stuff. So this is based off of what was included the previous time that we held the English camp. The 2021 details are still to be decided, so some of the numbers might change. So we do provide, or we have provided, round-trip airfare with limitations and procedures. So we would cover the cost of a flight from the airport near to your home or to your university to Japan and back. And this might include, say, a stopover or a layover if that helps to reduce the quality, reduce the price of the flight. If you wanted to fly, say, to China for a week first and then fly over to Japan, then we would reduce the amount that we would cover. And that's because our program sponsors really want to encourage you to come to Japan instead, if you have the extra time, and to really explore what Japan has to offer. And when we organize these flights, you would pay for a $500 deposit. And this is paid to the agency using a credit or debit card. And we would deduct $100 of that as an onboarding fee. And this covers pre-training, vetting, background checks, admin, everything. And then once the program is finished, after about 45 days or so, you would then receive $400 back, provided that you haven't destroyed your housing or anything like that. So this is the deposit just to help make sure that you come to Japan and you stay on the program. You don't want you to run off and do whatever you want with a free trip to Japan. So that is the airfare that we cover. We also provide housing for the duration of the program. So this was Common Up, one of the organizations who provides this housing. You will typically be put into shared housing. What that means is that you would have your own room and then you would share amenities. So you might share, say, the kitchen, and there might be a few bathrooms and toilets and so on. So that's majority of people will be in that kind of situation. We also might have access to some dorm rooms, and we also have homestays for people who are traveling mostly outside of the big cities. And I'll talk a bit about that because I was on a homestay during my second year in my third week. So I went to a small town called Kushiro in Hokkaido, so up north in the east. And typically you'll be staying with the family of one of the students on the program. So if you're worried about the language barrier, the student is there to help act as the communicator between you and their family. And it was just an amazing experience. What can I say? I had my homestay mom make a bento lunch for me every day. I'd come home and I would beat up the little kids in Smash Brothers. We went out for a sushi restaurant towards the end of the week. It was just a lovely experience because you really get to feel like part of the family over the span of these 5-6 days. If homestays are not available, typically you might also be put into a hotel for that week if you're in a pretty remote venue and there aren't any share houses in the area, or there aren't enough people who are able to provide a homestay for you. And if you specifically want an individual apartment, then there are additional fees required for that. But that's something that can be discussed further in the onboarding process on a case-to-case basis. We provide, I should also mention, for if you arrive before the program starts or stay after the program ends, then you can request housing, but that would have to be paid for you out of pocket. So we cover the cost of housing during the duration of the program. If you come a bit early or stay a bit late, we might still be able to provide housing, provided that you give us enough early notice so that we can organize that and you're able to pay for that. We also provide weekly food subsidies. So that is 2,300 yen per weekday of work. So that is there to cover the cost of the food. And that is actually pretty decent. You might think, oh, Tokyo is going to be very expensive food. I know London is quite expensive with their food. New York is quite expensive with food. Los Angeles is quite expensive with their food. Actually, it's pretty reasonable because convenience stores are, I guess, as they say, pretty convenient. You get a lot of really good quality food at really reasonable prices. I know it sounds weird getting convenience store food and living off of that. Actually, it's not that bad. I promise. You'd be pleasantly surprised by how good quality the food actually is. We have some people who are able to really budget their money and kind of really spread out the money over the whole program. Some people, like myself, I love my food. I love to splash out on food. So I'll bring in a bit of extra money knowing that I'm going to spend it on, getting that extra sized portion of ramen in the night. Or I might buy a couple of extra souvenirs for my family. Or I might buy that manga book that I still can't read yet because I'm that bad at Japanese. But when it comes to money, there's quite a few different options. Some people really like to hold a tight budget if they're not able to provide that extra money for themselves. But some people like to splash out a little bit more. We also cover the transportation to and from the class and to and from the venue, and any additional required travel. Yes, I think we've just got a message in the chat. 2,300 yen is about £16.50 per weekday for anyone who's in the UK. For anyone in the US, that's about $20 to $23, depending on the conversion rate. So hopefully that should help understand. Thank you, Roy, for putting that into the chat. So yes, we cover transportation to and from the class venue. So this would be like taking the train in the morning to get to your venue, or maybe taking the flight or the bullet train over to Hokkaido, where you might have your next week coming along. We do not cover the cost of the journey to and from the airport at the beginning and end of the program. So when you first come into Japan, you have to make your own way to the hostel where we would stay at. So that would not be covered. And at the end of the program, when you make your way to the airport to fly back home, that would also not be covered. But all the other required travel would be covered. We also previously covered some optional field trips, program retreats, Japanese language classes, after class activities throughout the program. And the way we've done this previously would be, say, interns are allowed up to 2 subsidized programs. Anything extra, they might have to pay out of pocket. Some particular programs might not be subsidized at all, and you just have to pay out of pocket. The Japanese language classes are based mostly in Tokyo. So if you're planning on traveling around the country, or you're planning on staying mostly in Osaka and Kyoto, typically you wouldn't have the opportunity to come to the Japanese language classes because they're just too far away from you. So that's something to keep in mind. We also cover, as I've mentioned before, health and accident insurance. We've also had counseling, which was introduced in previous programs because we thought it was really important to be able to help you with your mental health and support, provided that you fill out your health and wellness forms when that comes in later in the process. So we can help you as much as we can, provided that you help us to help you. so that we know what's going on and we know how to support you in the way that you need it. So that's me talking on for a long time again. Feel free to ask any more questions in the chat. We've had some really great questions coming in so far and some really great helpful tips. Anything to do with more stuff outside of the classroom, I'm going to be talking about a little bit later, so feel free to wait for me to talk about that. So please ask away. Okay, so we have a question based off of required immunizations for the camp. So if I remember correctly from a UK perspective, there were a few required immunizations for some like mosquito-related diseases. I don't think this camp specifically requires them and checks on them. But if there is something related to the coronavirus vaccine, then that's something that we'll keep you updated with information. So at the moment, no, this might change with time, and we'll keep you updated with that as that happens. So thank you for the question. Shorter stays available, so 3 to 4 weeks perhaps. I don't think we've done that previously, but that's something that we could probably check on a case-to-case basis. So if you're interested in coming to the program, feel free to apply and let us know that you might only be available for a few weeks. And then as we look through the applications and we organize and fix our dates, then we'll let you know how feasible that is. So unfortunately, the answer right now is, I'm not really sure, but that's something that we will slowly start to understand better as the time comes. So a question about the food budget. So we provide you 2,300 yen per weekday. That is for you to spend however you choose. So if you wanted to, and I don't recommend this, skip breakfast, skip lunch, and then go straight into a 2,300 yen dinner, that is entirely your choice. I would not recommend that. Don't do that, please. That's really bad for your health. If you wanted to spend your budget more accordingly, so 500 yen for breakfast, 800 yen for dinner, and then 1,000 yen, 500 yen for breakfast, 800 yen for lunch, and then 1,000 yen for dinner, feel free, that's up to you. If you wanted to spend all of it at breakfast and then pay out of your pocket for the rest of the 2 meals, that's entirely up to you. So you're flexible to pay for your lunch and your meals as you choose. We have a question regarding the Japanese language classes available. So in previous years, we've done, say, entry beginner level, then an intermediate class, as well as a more advanced class. And again, these are mostly based in Tokyo. However, this year, things might be organized slightly differently, depending on how we can organize for our professors or our lecturers to come in and help run the sessions. They might be slightly more busy with the coronavirus situation. So this is how we've done it in the past. We've had a few different levels available, and in the future, it might change. So someone has asked about increasing the chances of getting placed in a particular city. The only thing you can do really is to request it. So put that on the application form that you would like to be in this particular city or this particular town. Excuse me. And then again, later on in the onboarding process, just keep reminding us. And hopefully, we can try to sort that out logistically. If you want to stay in a big city like Tokyo or Osaka, where we run the program basically 5 out of 5 weeks, you're more likely to be able to stay there or stay near there at least. If you wanted to be, say, in Nagoya for 5 weeks, I don't think Nagoya runs the program for 5 weeks. So if you wanted to stay in a smaller city, you might be able to get there for the weeks that they're running. After that, you'd have to return back to Tokyo or go to a different venue. So I hope that answers the questions that's in the chats. If there's any more questions, feel free to send them in. So what exactly are the speaking exercises? That's a really great question. I've got the textbook in front of me, and I'll literally open it up. Page 14, as an example, share your passion. So now that you've introduced yourself, it is time to get to know each other even better. So in this activity, please write something in the world you're passionate about You will then present this to the other members in your group. Take this opportunity to teach your peers something they might not know about you. So an example of a speaking exercise where they think for a moment, write down some ideas, and then present it to the rest of the group. Some of them are a little bit more free-flowing and active, so a bit more game-like. So one example that I really like is one-word story. So you just go around and each student says a single word and contributes to a bigger story. So once upon a time, there was a dragon who was hungry and liked soccer, right? And you can get some really amazing and wonderful stories coming out of there. So you've got some exercises which are a bit more, write down, think your ideas, say them to the rest of the group and ask questions and try and get some discussions going, and some which are a bit more fun and exciting and a bit more playful. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, so we're into the last 10 minutes of the hour, so I'd like to try to wrap up the presentation and then we can go to an open floor Q&A. So outside of the classroom, here are some of the cultural experiences and activities that some of our interns have done outside of their working hours. So in Japan, in the summer, there's lots of matsuris or festivals that are going on. You can basically always find something every weekend. You can go visit an onsen, as they have in the top right, which is a Japanese hot spring bath. If you're worried about tattoos, for instance, some onsen are a bit more relaxed than others with regards to that. And there are other alternatives as well that you might be able to go to, which are, again, more relaxed. This is something that we've built up over the years, as previous interns as well have thought about going to onsens with tattoos. We've had cooking classes previous years, and we've also visited, as I've said before, Hakone, which is close to Mount Fuji, for our retreat. We've organized activities for tea ceremonies, calligraphy classes, boat rides, hiking trips, and so on. Some of these you might have to pay a fee for. So I think the calligraphy classes you typically pay out of pocket. Others you might be able to get subsidized. So the tea ceremony, for example. Others you can just kind of do on your own, right? How much does hiking cost besides the water bottle and lunch? I don't know. I actually don't know how to hike. An example of some of the language classes that we've had and some language exchanges as well. So we typically have a language exchange held at Tokyo University every year, and it's just an opportunity to get to talk with some university students from Japan, because they're just as interested in meeting you as you are interested in meeting them. And these are some of the different venues that we've had. So on top, we have a slightly smaller venue. So you can see maybe about 30 or so students with a handful of interns. And in the bottom, you can see a much bigger group. So closer to maybe 50, maybe even 60 students, and closer to perhaps 10 or 12 interns there. So, you get a wide variety of different experiences across the different venues. This was the team back in 2015, only about 11 people, and our program director, Matt, up in there in the purple shirt, jumping excited for being on the program for about 5 or 6 years running. Then in 2016, the team grew a bit to, I think I counted about 48 people. I'm glad we don't have those hideous green shirts because I don't want to wear those. In 2017, we grew even bigger. And this was the group that we had back then. That was the cohort. I think it's around 100 or so people. Then excuse me, no, that's not 100 people. That's closer to about 60 people. Then in 2018, then we grew to about 100 or so people. And, you might be able to spot me. I'm kind of near the middle there in the front because I love attention. And this was our cohort back in 2018. The darker blue shirts are the returning interns. So those who were on 2017 or 2016 or 2015 who decided to come back and help build the program. 2019 was the first year that we split into two groups, Group A at the top and Group B at the bottom. And you can see we have about 100 or so people in each group. And that was how we decided to run things in 2019. In 2020, we did not run the program due to the pandemic. But in 2021, you might be there in this picture. Next year around, when we do another round of info sessions, you might be here as well. And if you're interested in the program and you have a wonderful experience, you can also return. And the returning interns are a big part of organizing the program, helping everything run smoothly. I was an intern on the program in 2018, And I loved it so much, it came back as a leader, and now I'm in a more managerial position. Matt, our program director, was on the first year in 2015 and has just kept working with us since then. And so we have a big community of returning interns who really just help to make the program run. So coming on to the last slide now, visit the main website to apply. I think I might still have all of the links in my copy and paste. So info@commonappjapan.com if you want to ask questions to the generic kind of info page. Zane@commonappjapan.com if you want to ask questions to me specifically, if you feel more comfortable talking to someone that you've already kind of met virtually. The newsletter for more updates on the situation and how we're handling things. As I said before, we don't spam you. We only send emails about twice a month, and we don't share your emails out with anyone else. commonappjapan.com/global English camp for the main info page and access to the application process as well. And commonappjapan.com/webinars, which is where this video will also be uploaded if you want to see that again. Or if you really wanted to, we've also uploaded previous recordings of previous sessions if you want to hear me say the same thing in a slightly different way. And as we also have on the slide, the Twitter page as well, twitter.com/commonappjapan, if you wanted to ask questions through there. And as I kind of wrap up these slides, I really just want to say, just apply right now. Just get it over and done with. The early phase is starting to end at the end of the 30th of November. So you have about this weekend, and then things start to get close to the final deadline. You really want to get your application in on the early phase to really just maximize your chances. If you're within the early phase, you're all treated equally. Once you're out of the rolling early phase, because it's a rolling basis, we look at application by application on how we want the applicants to come in. So thank you for listening to me for basically an hour straight. If you have any more questions, I'll still be here for a while, for about 15 minutes or so. I'll open the floor up as well. I'll end the presentation, and feel free to ask questions in the chat. Feel free to turn on your mic or your cam if you feel comfortable. And yeah, let me know if you want any more information on anything. So I'm going to stop share here. There we go. And we have a few questions in the chat already, so I'll go through those.
Thank you very much. That was really helpful.
Thank you very much, Roy.
Thanks. I'm going to have to go. I've got to go to another meeting. That was really helpful. Thank you. Cheers. Take care.
Bye. So we have a few questions from the chat. So are dormitories and shared accommodations separated by gender? So as far as I'm aware, we haven't had that previously, but if you request it in the application, we might be able to organize something like that, particularly if there are enough people who really want to be in a single-sex dormitory or a single-sex accommodation. So that's definitely something we can try to accommodate as per requested. You can access the presentation. So I'll upload the recording of this later on in the next few days in the links that I've sent. So if you just scroll up the chat a little bit in webinars, you'll be able to access this recording and you'll be able to see the presentation there again. A few thank yous. Thank you very much for coming to the presentation. Thank you for asking lots of questions. What do you typically expect to see in terms of volume of applicants? So I think, if I remember correctly, we've had somewhere between 1,000 to 1,200 in terms of applicants over the previous years. And we accept typically around 200 or so. So I know the odds look a bit low on that end, but I believe it was Abraham Lincoln that said, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So if you're worried about that ratio, don't be. Just send your application in and don't worry at all about everyone else. Just make sure your application is as strong as you can make it. Will I say that the first and second interview stages are very competitive? Unfortunately, I don't have the numbers to back up any comment. So I have no idea how competitive the first and second interview stages are. So apologies for that. But as this next year comes, I'll be a bit more involved in the application process. Some of you might even see me in the interviews. And so I'll be able to give answers for that later if you need me to. So thank you all for your questions. I see a few people start to dot out now. So feel free to keep asking questions if you have any. Okay, Since most people have left, I will end the call here. Thank you very much. I'll still be here if you want to ask me questions while the recording is off. So thank you all for coming to the session, and I hope to see your application very soon.